Next, moving on, we have Women in Power question and answer session, presenting a panel of beautiful, influential people who have taken the time out to talk to us today. So to start with question and answer session, first, I would like to request Honorable Dr. Anne Ely, Member of Parliament, to come to the stage. Could I request Dr. Divya Sharma, Indian Society of Western Australia Committee member, to accompany her on the stage. Honorable Dr. Anne Ely has been the federal member for Cowan since 2016 and is also the Federal Minister for Early Childhood Education and Minister for Youth in the Albanese government. She is a 2011 inductee into the Western Australian Women's Hall of Fame, a 2016 nominee for Australian of the Year, and a 2016 recipient of the prestigious Australian Security Medal. In 2021, she was awarded the Mackinnon Prize for Emerging Political Leader of the Year.
Next, I would like to request Honourable Miss Zenita Mascarenhas, Member of Parliament, to kindly come up onto the stage, and could I also request Mrs. Asha Bhatt onto the stage, CEO of Southern Aboriginal Corporation, to accompany her. Honourable Miss Zenita Mascarenhas, Member of Swan, was elected the House of Representatives for Swan, Western Australia in 2022. Asha Bhatt leads the award-winning Regional Southern Aboriginal Corporation, SAC, which provides services and programs that address the Noongar people's needs and aspirations in cooperation with the community and business organisations. Asha was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for her service to WA Indigenous communities as part of the 2022 Queen's Birthday Honours. Very recently, Asha has been inducted into the WA Women's Hall of Fame.
Next, I would like to request Honourable Ms. Kate Cheney, Member of Parliament, to kindly come to the stage, and I request Mrs. Bindya Manchanda, ISWA Committee member, to accompany her to the stage. Honourable Ms. Kate Cheney is WA's first female independent federal member of Parliament in the House of Representatives. She represents the community of Curtin, which stretches from the edge of Perth to the Indian Ocean, bordered by the Derbyl-Yarragon Swan River, from Mossman Park to Gallup.
Next, I would like to request Honourable Miss Margaret Quirk, Member of the Legislative Assembly, to kindly come to the stage, and I would also like to request Mrs. Bitika Kasta, ISWA Committee member, to accompany her on the stage. Honourable Miss Margaret Quirk, Member of Lansdale, servicing the suburbs of Lansdale, Madley, Darch, Alexander Heights, Purcell, Hocking and Wangara. She served as chair of the Joint Standing Committee on the Corruption and Crime Commission, currently Australian chair, Global Organisation of Parliamentarians Against Corruption, GOPAC. She is a member of various government and community boards, including Sir Charles Gardner Hospital Board, Renewable Energy Advisory Board, Welfare Rights Centre, ACT, and Edmund Rice Centre, WA.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to NAARI 2023, everybody. How exciting. I'm loving the buzz and the energy. So 2023, I'm Divya Sharma, is International Women's Day, is about cracking the code, or innovation for a gender equal future. And today we are very privileged to have these lovely 4 women in leadership roles in both our federal and state parliament. And in this 30-minute Q&A, a bit like what you see on television, we're going to explore their journeys and some of their reflections as well. And we do have some questions that we're going to get through. We may have time for audience questions, and I'd really like you all, ladies, to please keep your answers to about 2 minutes, and we'll keep going. I think my first question to each of you will be, what moment inspired your move into politics? Starting with Margaret, your reflection.
Well, namaste everyone, and can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we meet today and pay my respects to their elders. I don't think there was one defining moment when I decided to enter politics. In fact, I suppose as a young law student, I was more interested in working behind the scenes than facing an election every 4 years and all that goes with being a politician and local member of parliament. But I was always interested in social justice. As a lawyer, I was always interested in reform and progressive government. So those things gradually evolved, and when I was in my 40s, I got the opportunity, largely I think because of the Labor Party's affirmative action policy, to run for a safe seat. But politics has always been of interest of mine. I lived in Canberra for 7 years. You can't live in that town without getting very much infused with interest in politics. But throughout my career in politics, which has been a lot longer than these ladies, they've had to juggle husbands and children. I have been fortunate, to use an old-fashioned term, to be a childless spinster. So certainly my main goals were Indigenous rights, integrity in government, law reform. I have a criminal law background, so also very much with amending the legislation and having decent oversight of police powers. That will do for the time being. These ladies are much more interesting than me. Thank you.
No, not at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. I'm sure we are very interested in the shopping. If we can have the shopping at a dialed-down volume, I'd really appreciate it.
Just for a while.
Just for a little while.
Yeah, just for a little while, ladies, if you can hold on to your enthusiasm for shopping. Thank you. Dr.
Kate, please.
Thanks, Divya. It is hard competing with shopping in a room like this.
What are you talking about, Kate?
That's true. I've been shopping already.
She shopped it in the first 10 minutes of walking into the ground floor, what she's wore, and it took three women to tie a sari.
That's true.
Fantastic.
I don't think I could repeat it. I never thought I'd be in politics, and I worked in various different areas trying to make a difference in law, in strategy, in the corporate environment, particularly around Aboriginal affairs and sustainability, and also in community services. And then in January last year, a community group asked me if I would run for the seat of Curtin, and the thought of it made me feel sick. And I just thought there are so many reasons not to do it, but I felt that at that stage there was a lack of compassion in our leadership and a lack of vision about an optimistic view of what the country could be. So I ended up saying yes. So and being outside the party system, I felt like I was less constrained and could actually just do what I thought was right. So that was the inspiring. The moment for me was being asked.
Thank you.
For me, some of you may have heard this story that when my mum and dad looked at migrating to Australia and they went to the embassy in Kenya, they said to my dad, "You've got the right skills, but you're the wrong colour." And that's because we still had the White Australia policy in place. And so it was a Gough-Whitlam Labor government that unravelled the last parts of that policy. And so in some ways for me, my story would not be possible if it wasn't for the Labor Party. When I was asked the first time, I was heavily pregnant and I wasn't a mother, and it was so much easier to say yes. I decided to not stand for pre-selection for that 2019 election. And then I was asked a second time, but this time I was a mother of two. And for me, again, it was a really hard thing to think about. And for me, it's about the kind of mother that I want to be. I have a 2.5 and a 5-year-old. I'm dressed like this because I came from a picnic and I've been climbing equipment. So, and I thought about shopping before, like getting on the stage, but I wasn't here early enough. But the thing that I'd say about migrants is that we believe in a better future and we work our butts off. And my parents made sacrifices to come here, and I'd worked in climate change action for 12 years, and so I had to ask myself, what am I prepared to do to create a better future? And luckily I've got a great mother and a great husband, but I would not have been able to do that. And the truth is, for Swan, we achieved the second largest swing across Australia, and a part of that, I'm going to say, is my migrant attitude, that if you want to do something, you work bloody hard. Kate's margin was a bigger swing though.
Thanks. And Dr. Anne Ali, I wanted to ask you that, what inspired your move into politics? And then what advice would you give women who have faced challenges in accessing political power or holding leadership positions?
Well, thank you, and namaste. Hey, NAARI. Okay, so I was born in a country as a second girl child, and in a country where the daughter of a bus driver could only ever hope to be the daughter of a bus driver. So politics was never a vision that I could even have imagined as a young girl. I got married very young in my 20s, and then I was a single mother, and I was completely disinterested in politics. I completely disinterested in what the men in power had to say, because I never saw myself in that position, or even the possibility of being in that position. In 2015, I was a professor of counter-terrorism and an advisor to the United Nations. And in February of that year, I got invited by President Obama to go to the White House as the only Australian representative for his Countering Violent Extremism conference. And I thought, this is great. My career has finally taken off. 2 decades of work is paying off. Later that year, I got invited to the Club de Madrid, not a disco, which is a policy dialogue that was set up by Bill Clinton and Kofi Annan. And about 3 weeks later, I had to be in Vienna for United Nations talks. So I took my husband and I said, we're going to Madrid, we're going to do a bit of a European tour, and we'll end in Vienna. I was very excited for Madrid, but within 2 days of dialogue, I realised that the room was full of people who had political capital and had political power and had squandered it. So when I went to speak on stage on the dialogue, I told them exactly that, and for some reason they haven't asked me back. Then in Vienna, I went to the United Nations talks, and walking out of the United Nations building that day, I turned to my husband and I said, I'm done. I said, I have this great career where I travel the world and I attend conferences and dialogues and summits, and I'm going to go home and nothing will change because there is no political will. So on the way back from Europe, we went to Bali, and I was literally lying on the beach in Bali. I got a phone call, which I didn't recognise. Then I got a text message saying, this is the Labor Party, please give us a call. I didn't know how they got my number or why they were calling me, but when I called them back, they said they wanted me to run in the next election. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what running in an election meant. I didn't know what it would take. But when I went to meet with them and I said to them, why would I do that? Why would I give up my career that I've built for 2 decades? Why would I give all of that up and become a member of Parliament? And the response was, because, Anne, it's a different way to make change. And that was the moment that inspired me into politics. My advice for all women coming into any kind of a position where you're a public figure or a position of politics, first of all, you don't have to be in politics to do politics. That's something I've really recognised. You can be political in your everyday, and you can make change in your everyday. Don't ever discount the tiniest things, the smallest things that you think don't matter, but they can actually have a huge impact and a ripple effect on an individual, on a family, and on a community. That would be my first thing. Find your power, find your passion, and find a way to make it count. My second thing is that when you come into public life, especially if you're a woman, but especially if you're an intersectional woman, I happen to be Muslim, Arabic-born, African, and brown, then you're going to cop a lot. You are going to cop a lot. And the thing is to always remember why you're here, that you are here for a reason, that people put you there for a reason, and that always keep your eye on the fact that you are not there just to make the parliament brighter and more beautiful. You are actually there for a reason. And that is what drives me every day. It's what makes me get out of bed every morning, and I know that's the same for all the women in parliament. Find the fire in your belly and feed that fire every single day.
Hi, Zanita. What advice do you have for women who want to work in a male-dominated field? How did you practically go about doing that?
First of all, I'd say it's about holding space and being assertive. And I feel like for me, when I started working on mine sites, I remember actually the first site, and this doesn't sound very ladylike, but after that first site that I worked on, and I went back to the office, and my boss explained to me that the guys were unhappy that I swore as much as they did, and in some ways that's a little bit of the sexism that operates on site. But I think it's, for me, what it was about is actually connecting with people and making sure that they understand that you're a human and that you want to connect with them. And the truth is, it's about influence of change. And so for me, when I was working on site, it wasn't about my engineering degree. What the guys loved is that my dad was a metal worker, and so I just treated them with respect, and that's what they loved. And so I feel like respect is a good place to start.
Thank you.
Okay, coming to you, Kate. Describe a powerful woman politician's leadership moment you have experienced anywhere in the world.
Thank you. What really stuck out for me was Jacinda Ardern's reaction to the Christchurch attacks on the mosque. And I just remember that the way she reacted was so human. And it was just, it was compassion and it was inclusion. And, you know, and she said, you are us, you know, we are, you are our community. And she made herself part of that community that had experienced that and prevented it from being turned into an anti-immigration event. And that, the humanity and compassion that she brought naturally to that terrible, tragic situation just made me think this is what we see more of when we see women in power, is bringing that humanity to the political environment.
So what significance did it have? Did it have a long-term effect on your thinking or on some kind of a change that you had?
Well, I suppose it made me think that it was possible. So it did make me think, well, you can go into politics and talk about things like kindness. You know, it seems a bit fluffy, and I know she's had a bit of a rough, ride with that, but I think it pushed out the boundaries of the possible to me and made me think we can bring these human qualities into our political discussion.
And being kind is one of the best ones, isn't it? Over to you.
Margaret, to you now. Thank you for waiting patiently. A question that, what achievement as a parliamentarian have you been most proud of? How did you practically go about doing that?
It's very hard with a career which has spanned 20 years, over 20 years. I've been privileged to be a shadow minister and a minister, a parliamentary secretary, had various other roles both within the party and within Parliament. And so it's hard to pinpoint one thing. I think when we all come into Parliament, we make the big promises and we want the big ribbon cutting ceremonies and the large infrastructure, but at the end of the day it's about people. So I get the most satisfaction out of small things. For example, someone came along to me a few years ago and said, I'm a single dad, I can't enrol my child in school because we're living in the car and we've no fixed address, and the school said we needed a fixed address to enrol his young son. So we sorted that out in a couple of hours, but we also sorted out some social work and other agencies to assist that family. So although that's only a small thing, that's the kind of thing that I think gives me satisfaction. At a larger level, they don't often talk about parliamentary committees, but I'm very proud of the work we did in the area of post-traumatic stress disorder. I was on a committee that made lots of recommendations to ensure that our firefighters, our police, other volunteers in the emergency services, our ambulance drivers, all got better support and better psychiatric and counselling services when they got PTSD, and also that their supervisors recognised it. So they're the sorts of things. And finally, I'd say education is the key to opportunity. And so I've had a strong relationship with schools. I think we've opened 2 or 3 new schools in my electorate in that time, or probably more. And I believe that every child has the right to a quality education, and that they shouldn't be hampered in life by failing to be able to access that education and other community services. So in terms of ribbon cutting, I don't like to think of that. I think when I was Minister for Corrections, we did open a new jail in the Kimberley at $150 million, but that's not the sort of thing that I like to brag about. I'd prefer a place where we had fewer people in prison, to tell you the truth. So I think that's also a difference between males and females in Parliament. I think the males have got the lines a bit more ready as to what they've achieved. Women are much more modest and are actually thinking of the next thing they need to do, not what they've done in the past. So maybe that's a generalisation, but certainly in my experience, I find this question very hard because I'm looking at moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That was
fantastic. I love that. We are looking forward. Thank you, Margaret. Dr. Ali, can I ask you, the word imposter syndrome inevitably gets asked, and many women either are made to feel or feel imposter syndrome. What is your advice to women who feel this way?
Oh my gosh, I think you just asked the queen of imposter syndrome. Because, I remember the first day that I walked into the federal parliament, and I walked in there with all my colleagues who had just got elected in 2016, and it seemed to me that they were all like, wow, we're finally here, da-da. And I walked in, and I remember walking in that hallway where they've got all the paintings of the men, and it seemed to me like they were all looking at me and going, who let you in? What are you doing here? And so it took me a very long time, actually, now that I think about it, to actually feel like I belonged and feel like I deserved to be there. And I think that imposter syndrome is a lot of us talking in our own heads and being told, but it's not other people that are telling us that, it's our own heads that are telling us that. And sometimes I literally have to say out loud to myself, stop it, Anne, stop it. Because I can hear my own voice in my own head telling me this stuff. So I look in the mirror and I go, just stop it, stop it. So I think that, for me, I think it's really about recognising, where does imposter syndrome come from, right? Where is it coming from? And yes, we are made to feel the lesser in many ways, primarily because we haven't seen ourselves reflected, right? We haven't seen ourselves in Parliament. We haven't seen those role models for ourselves. But also, it also comes from us. And from years and years and years and years and years, in my case, as I mentioned, I was second girl child born in an Arab Muslim family. There were no expectations on me, right? So it comes from years and years and years and years of that. So I think my advice is stop, think, and talk to yourself. Tell yourself every day, no, you are not an imposter. No, you are here for a reason. No, you deserve to be here. And recognize when it's your own self-talk that's creating this for you. And then if that doesn't work, call me and I'll tell you.
Thank you. We have many men here. Sunita, what are ways men can be good allies? What do we need to do to engage and inspire male advocates?
All right. Well, I'll start with my favourite male ally, which is my dad. And I was also a second girl child. But what my dad did was inspire me to feel confident with using tools or being mechanical or loving maths. And I think that every dad can do that. The next thing that I'd say is that the federal Labor government is more than 50% women. And the reason why that's the case is because we had targets of what we wanted to achieve. And the thing that targets do is that, and there's this discussion about merit versus tokenism. And the truth is, women rock. We punch above our weight. We're very impressive. We bring a lot to the table. But what targets do is it shows that there is a space for people at the table. And I will say that in different communities, including the Indian community, there will be times where I will be introduced to a group of men, but I won't be introduced to the ladies. And I'm wondering if that's because there needs to be more women in leadership roles, or whether we need to make space. And so some of the things that I've seen men do very well, and in fact, the Minister for Immigration and Multicultural Affairs, Andrew Giles, is incredibly impressive at leaving space for others to have their voices heard. And sometimes in this world, it's all these egos fighting against each other to be heard, but sometimes it's the quietest voice that has the most amount of fountain of knowledge to share. And so I'd say sometimes hold back, hold the space for someone else. Think about the different committees that exist. Are there 50% women there? And are you making space? And one of the favourite stories of one of my second engineering boss, he talked about this talented young male that was brilliant, and they did group exercises, and the thing that they saw is that this particular man was sexist. He was really sexist. And for my boss, he's kind of like, well, he's not going to work in our team. And that attitude was not going to succeed. And the truth is, we need diverse teams, whether that's culturally diverse or gender diverse, and we need to make those spaces available. And we achieve better when we work together. Thanks.
Well said.
Okay, coming to you, Kate. As women, we can be very hard on ourselves, isn't it? How self-compassion can help women in power?
Thank you. I, having come in with no political background and been in the job now for not quite a year, there are a lot of things that I don't know, and I have to remind myself that all I can do is my best. And as an independent, every time there's a vote, I agonise over it, and I try and hear both sides, and I have to make a decision, often in real time with amendments that I've just seen, about how I'm going to vote on that. And sooner or later, I'm going to make a mistake, just because I'm only human. And often you literally find out about the amendment as you're walking in to vote on it, which is quite ridiculous. And I think all I can do is do my best, and also admit mistakes when you make them. And I feel like for my community, if that's the promise that I can make to them, that I will do my best, then I hope that they will be forgiving if sometimes I do make mistakes. So that's the that's the line that sticks with me, is all I can do is my best.
Self-respect. Thank you.
Back to you, Margaret, now. Would you please give a specific example of the tension between competing demands? There are lots of roles. Political, health, and technology. How have you handled it, all of these, in your role?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm probably least well placed to answer this. I don't have the demands of a young family or a husband who never sees me, but certainly in my latter years I've had to be a carer for two parents with Alzheimer's. So in terms of dividing a time between work and family, that is certainly creates a tension. On top of this, I think the technology example is quite an interesting one, because when I first became a Member of Parliament, people would very politely ring up and ask to have an appointment so they could come and discuss their problem. Now we would get a day tens of emails with quite complex problems, and they all, because it's email, they expect either a instantaneous or certainly an answer that day. So that side of technology has made things a lot harder, as has Facebook. So in the local communities, people will gossip on Facebook or, for example, make racist remarks or other things which are divisive in the community, rather than just stick their head over the fence and talk to their neighbours. So I think that side of technology is not good for community building, and for our jobs, technology. I'm very pleased we're not having as many Zoom meetings. I didn't like them too much, but certainly things like people expecting instant answers to complex problems is certainly very challenging.
Thank you, Margaret.
And our final round of questions. Dr. Ali, can I ask you, in our communities, how can women stand in solidarity with one another?
I actually think women already do that, and they do it incredibly well. I think, there's we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, right? And even to be an ally to other women, we put pressure on ourselves. But when you think about what are the things that women do well, women are very good at keeping those social networks with each other, at, the sisterhood and the friendship with other women. So I actually think we already do that very well, and we should continue to do that well. I think we need to resist sometimes the kind of the tall poppy syndrome, what's in Australia called the tall poppy syndrome, where we don't want to get, somebody gets a bit too successful, we try and tear them down a little bit. I think we need to resist that. But for me personally, I take very seriously the responsibility of ensuring that I create a pathway for the women who come after me. I may have been the first, and for me it wasn't anything that factored into my thinking during my first election campaign. But I remember shortly after I won in 2016, I did an interview with Arabic Radio, and after the interview, the woman who had interviewed me said, it's so great to have you into Parliament, because I tell my daughter every day that she can be whatever she wants to be, but you've made it real. You've made it real. And at that point, I thought, oh my God, that's such a big responsibility on me. But it dawned on me just how important it is that for those of us who are the first in any respects, that we ensure that we are not the last, that we pave that way, that we create a pathway for those who come after us, and we support those who come after us, and make time and make room for that in our lives to ensure that that happens. So while we already support each other very well, and I think we need to give ourselves a pat on the back for that, because like Margaret said, it's often really difficult for women to say what we do well, and what we do well is we support other women. So let's give ourselves a pat on the back. And let us also remember the responsibility that each and every one of us has to be the shoulders that the next generation stands on.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful.
Zanita, we have a lot of Australian with Indian heritage here. As an Australian with Indian heritage, do you identify with so-called culturally and linguistically diverse label? Or now culturally and racially marginalised women in leadership according to the Diversity Council of Australia? And how do you deal with that expectation as well?
So some of these labels were labels that I didn't know existed, and so I describe myself sometimes as a Goan Indian Australian, and it's one of those things where I think it's useful to understand collective experiences that people face, and in the end what we're trying to do is create an equitable world where everyone can achieve their full potential. That's what the goal is. However, there is lived experience that people would have had that others wouldn't understand, and so for some of my Caucasian friends, they don't hear me talk about racism very often, but like it does happen, but it's not necessarily one of those things that I want to harp on about. But I think that there are different types of racism, so let's say individual racism, but also institutional racism. And I think that for me as a political leader, it's important that I understand the biases that exist. And for me, probably one of the times where I intimately understood that was when there was a family that came to my office and they were wanting to stay in Australia, and it was this young man and his mother, and his mother looked like my mother. And that had never happened before. And so in my mind, historically, it's always been these white men making decisions, but that have always had these experiences of there being other people. But for me, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, this lady reminds me of my mother so much. And that was something that made me realise that the lived experiences do inform the way that you make decisions.
Thank you.
All right. The last one, Kate. What advice would you give to any woman when she wants to find her voice?
Thank you. I think women's superpower is community. And if you look at school groups, parents and friends associations or community groups, so often it's the women who are the fabric of those communities. And I think that is also the key to finding our voice, is finding other people who feel the way you do, and that really builds confidence that you're not alone. In my campaign, it was largely driven by women across my community who decided that they wanted to see something different, and they mobilised their community groups, and found that motivating. So I think for any woman who's finding her voice, finding the other people who share that voice is a really good way to build your confidence and also build some momentum and some scale.
Thank you. Thank you. Margaret, before we wrap up the round of questions here, what's the biggest lesson you have learned in your time in politics so far?
I think others have touched upon this. Be yourself, be confident about your own abilities, and don't feel you've got to get sucked into other people's games or ways of doing things. The public, I think, appreciate authenticity much more, and I certainly have always, sometimes to my detriment, been a bit forthright and frank, but I think at the end of the day people respect your honesty and your integrity. So that, I think, should come above almost everything else. And similarly, someone's mentioned respect. Being respectful of everyone, regardless of experiences, is absolutely vital. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, absolutely. What an amazing session we've had, and I think we've run out of time for further questions. I'd really like everybody to please put their hands together, and I'd ask you all to just stay. We've just got Margaret Quirk again, Kate Chaney, Honorary Kate Chaney MP, Honorary Zanetta Mascarenhas MP, Dr. Anne Alley, Honorary MP. Please give them a big round of applause. And we're just going to, please ladies stay, we're just going to call the Management Committee also on stage to felicitate you guys as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone, for such an informative and inspiring session today. So now I would like to invite Mr. Rohan Amlani and Mr. Jasjeet Singh Maan and Mrs. Bitika Kasta, committee members of ISWA, to kindly felicitate Honorable Dr. Anne Alley.
Now I'd like to invite Mr. Deepak Sharma, Secretary of ISWA, and Mr. Deepak Gupta, Vice President of ISWA, to kindly felicitate Honourable Kate Chaney.
Kate Chaney. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Rakesh Bhan, Assistant Secretary ISWA, and Mr. Subrata Bhattacharjee, Treasurer ISWA, to kindly felicitate Honorable Zanetta Mascarenhas.
Now I would like to invite Mr. Binud Agarwala and Mr. Veer Anna Sattareddy, committee members of ISWA, to kindly felicitate Honourable Margaret Quirk.
Now, may we please, stay here. Yeah. Now, may we please request Mr. Satish Nair to accompany Dr. Jagdish Krishnan, MLA of Riverton, onto the stage, please.
Thank you everyone for all your attention and love.